There are moments, rare, unsettling moments, when something shifts in the unseen, and you feel it before you understand it. A strange heaviness, a sudden pause in your spirit, a feeling like something is off. You try to ignore it. You tell yourself it's stress, overthinking, just another passing emotion. But deep down you know, something changed. And this message, right here, right now, is not random. It is not coincidence. It is not just another video. It is a divine interruption, and it found you because heaven allowed it to reach you at the exact second your spirit could no longer pretend everything is fine. Archangel Michael has stepped forward, and this time he is not silent. He is not distant. He is not gentle in the way you expect. He is firm. He is direct. And yes, he is angry. Not the kind of anger that destroys blindly, but the kind that rises when something sacred has been mishandled, when a line has been crossed, when a warning was given and ignored. You may not even fully realize what you did. That's what makes this moment so dangerous. Because sometimes the most serious spiritual mistakes are not loud. They don't come with explosions or obvious consequences. They come quietly through a decision you brushed off, a voice you ignored, a boundary you crossed, a truth you chose not to face. And now, something is forming. Have you noticed it? Things not flowing like they used to. Doors hesitating instead of opening. Peace becoming harder to hold on to. A subtle tension following you, even in moments that should feel calm. That's not random. That's the after effect. Archangel Michael is not reacting to something small. He is responding to a shift that has already begun in your spiritual alignment. A shift that, if left uncorrected, will begin to take shape in ways you cannot reverse easily. And here's what makes this even more intense: you were warned. Not necessarily with words like this, not with thunder or lightning, but with nudges, feelings, moments where something inside you said, "Don't do that," or "This isn't right." And yet you moved anyway. You dismissed it. You told yourself it didn't matter. But in the spirit it did. This is the part no one talks about. How a single moment of misalignment can echo. How one ignored conviction can open a door. How one decision can create a ripple that begins to return back to you. That's where you are now. Standing at the edge of consequence, but also at the doorway of correction. Because if this were only about punishment, you wouldn't be hearing this. If heaven had decided to let things unfold without intervention, this message would have never reached you. But it did, which means something critical. There is still time. Not much. Not unlimited. But enough. Enough to understand. Enough to respond. Enough to shift what is already beginning to move toward you. Archangel Michael did not come just to confront you. He came to stop something before it fully arrives. But he will not force you. And that's the tension you feel right now. Because part of you wants to listen and another part of you wants to scroll away, to minimize this, to say this isn't that serious. But ask yourself honestly, why does this feel so personal? Why does it feel like this message is speaking directly into something you haven't told anyone? Why does your spirit feel exposed? Because this is not general. This is targeted. This is precise. This is a moment where heaven has allowed truth to meet you before consequence does. And right now you are being watched, not with judgment, but with expectation. What you do next matters more than you realize. Because this is not just about what you did. It's about what you choose now. Will you stay the same or will you shift before the result reaches you? The next part will reveal something deeper, something you haven't fully understood about the mistake itself and why it carries more weight than you thought. Do not disconnect now, because clarity is coming and it will change how you see everything. Type "I choose correction" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1717 is now activated. You keep replaying it, don't you? Maybe not consciously, maybe not in clear words, but something inside you has been circling back to a moment, a decision, a choice that didn't feel fully right, even as you made it. And the unsettling part is this: it didn't seem like a big deal at the time. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It didn't come with immediate consequences that forced you to stop. It slipped through quietly, almost unnoticed, like something harmless. But in the spirit it carried weight. Because what you did was not just physical. It was not just emotional. It was spiritual. There are actions that echo beyond what the eyes can see, and you stepped into one of those moments. You crossed a line that wasn't visible in the natural, but was clearly marked in the unseen. A boundary that was meant to protect you, not restrict you. And when you ignored that inner resistance, when you pushed past that quiet hesitation, something opened. Not dramatically, not instantly, but subtly, and that subtle opening is where the consequence began to form. You may have dismissed a conviction. You may have entertained something you were supposed to walk away from. You may have spoken words that carried more power than you realized. Or you may have aligned yourself, even briefly, with something that did not match the direction heaven was trying to lead you toward. And in that moment, the alignment shifted. This is what makes it serious. Because in the spiritual realm, alignment is everything. It determines what flows toward you, what attaches to you, what has access to you. And when that alignment is disturbed, even slightly, it creates a ripple effect. Not always immediate, not always obvious, but real. And that ripple is what Archangel Michael is addressing now. He is not reacting to a mistake the way humans do. He is responding to the impact of that mistake on your spiritual position. Because what you did didn't just affect a moment, it affected your direction. It altered the flow of protection, the clarity of your discernment, the strength of your covering. Not removed, not destroyed, but weakened just enough for something else to begin pressing in. And you felt that pressure, that unexplained heaviness, that sudden confusion where there used to be clarity, that hesitation where there used to be confidence. It's not your imagination. It's not random. It's the result of a shift that has not yet been corrected. What makes this even more intense is that you knew, at least on some level, there was a whisper, a pause, a subtle check in your spirit that said, "Don't go there." But you overrode it. Not out of rebellion, but out of rationalization. You told yourself it wasn't that serious. You told yourself you would fix it later. You told yourself it didn't matter. But in the spirit, it did. Because every time you override truth, even gently, it trains your spirit to become less sensitive. Not instantly, not completely, but gradually. And that is where danger begins. Not in loud disobedience, but in quiet compromise. Not in obvious wrongdoing, but in subtle misalignment that goes unaddressed. This is why Archangel Michael's response feels so strong. Not because you are beyond correction, but because you are too close to something significant to allow this to remain unchecked. You are not being confronted because you are lost. You are being confronted because you are positioned, and what you did interfered with that position. There is something ahead of you that requires clarity, strength, and alignment. And the mistake you made has introduced interference. Not enough to destroy your path, but enough to delay it. Enough to distort your perception. Enough to create a situation where, if you continue without correction, the result will begin to manifest in ways that feel external, even though they started internally. This is the part most people miss. They wait for visible consequences before they take spiritual misalignment seriously. They wait until things fall apart, until doors close, until relationships strain, until peace disappears. But by then, the ripple has already expanded. The formation has already begun. You are being addressed before that point. That is the mercy in this moment. Because the mistake itself is not the end. It is the uncorrected state that follows it that creates the real danger. And right now, you are in that space. Not fully fallen, not fully corrected. In between. In a moment where awareness has arrived, but action has not yet followed. And this is where everything can change. Because what you did can be reversed. What you opened can be closed. What shifted can be realigned. But only if you acknowledge the weight of it. Only if you stop minimizing it. Only if you recognize that even small spiritual decisions carry consequences when they are left unattended. Archangel Michael is not standing in anger to condemn you. He is standing in urgency because time matters here. Because the longer this remains unaddressed, the more stable that ripple becomes. And once it stabilizes, it begins to manifest in ways that are harder to trace back to the source. You are being given a chance to trace it back now. To see clearly what happened. To understand that this is not random. To accept that your action, however small it seemed, created a shift that must be corrected. And in the next part, you will begin to understand something even deeper: the signs you were given before this happened, and why ignoring them brought you to this exact moment. Type "I acknowledge the shift" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 2626 is now activated. There was a moment before all of this when everything could have gone differently. A dramatic moment. Not something loud enough to shake your world, but something quiet, subtle, almost easy to overlook. And yet, if you look back now, you can feel it, can't you? That pause you didn't honor. That hesitation you brushed aside. That inner voice that spoke just softly enough for you to ignore it without feeling guilty. That was a warning. Because heaven rarely shouts before it corrects. It whispers. It nudges. It places a gentle resistance in your spirit. A slight discomfort that doesn't make sense logically but feels undeniable emotionally. And those are the moments that matter most. Not the big decisions everyone can see, but the small, internal ones where you either listen or you override. You were not left without guidance. You were not walking blindly into that mistake. You were signaled. Maybe it came as a sudden uneasiness when everything around you seemed fine. Maybe it was a thought that interrupted your flow, a quiet "this isn't right" that didn't match your environment. Maybe it was a delay that felt inconvenient at the time, but now you realize it was trying to protect you. Or maybe it was a pattern, repeated more than once, gently steering you away, but you kept choosing the familiar instead of the aligned. Those were not coincidences. Those were interventions. But here is where it becomes real. You recognized at least one of those signs and still moved forward. Not because you are reckless. Not because you don't care. But because something in you chose comfort over correction. Familiarity over obedience. Immediate satisfaction over long-term alignment. And in that moment, the warning lost its authority, not because it was weak, but because it was dismissed. This is how the silence before the storm works. It is not empty. It is full of signals that are easy to overlook if you are not paying attention. And once those signals are ignored, the silence deepens. Not because heaven stopped speaking, but because your sensitivity to hearing began to shift. And that is what Archangel Michael is confronting now. Not just the mistake, but the pattern that led to it. Because the mistake did not come out of nowhere. It was preceded by moments of awareness that were gradually ignored. Each time you felt something and chose not to act on it, it became easier to do it again. Each time you sensed a misalignment and justified it, your internal compass adjusted just slightly. Not enough to completely lose direction. Not enough to drift. And drifting is dangerous because it does not feel like falling. It feels like moving forward, even when you are slowly moving off course. It feels normal. It feels manageable. Until one day, you look up and realize you are no longer where you were meant to be. That is where you found yourself. And now, looking back, the signs are clearer than they were in the moment. You can see where you hesitated. You can see where you knew better. You can see where you felt something was off but chose to continue anyway. That clarity you have now, that is not guilt. That is revelation. And revelation is not given to shame you. It is given to wake you. Because if you can see the pattern, you can break it. If you can recognize the signs you ignored, you can begin to respond differently when they appear again. And they will appear again. Not as punishment, but as another opportunity to align. But here is the urgency. The same way you ignored the earlier signs, you can ignore this moment too. You can feel this message, understand it, even agree with it, and still delay action. Still tell yourself you will deal with it later. Still minimize the importance of responding now. And if you do that, the pattern repeats. This is why this section matters so much. Because before consequence fully forms, there is always a window where awareness is offered one last time. A final moment where everything becomes clear enough for you to make a different choice. And this right now is that moment. Archangel Michael is not just pointing to what happened. He is showing you how it happened. Because if you only focus on the outcome, you miss the deeper lesson. But if you understand the pattern, you reclaim your authority over it. You are not powerless here. You are not stuck. You are being shown exactly where you stopped listening so you can start again. And as you sit with this, something inside you is beginning to sharpen. Your awareness is increasing. Your sensitivity is returning. You are starting to feel that inner voice again, not as something distant, but as something present, something real, something you can choose to follow. That is the beginning of correction. But correction must be completed. Because in the next section, you will understand something critical: why Archangel Michael's anger is not what you think it is, and why it may be the very thing protecting you right now. Do not turn away now. Because what feels intense is actually working in your favor. Type "I will not ignore the signs" again in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 3030 is now activated. As this truth settles into your spirit, understand this: every time you choose to stay, to listen, to receive messages like this, you are stepping into a divine flow that reaches far beyond you. There are souls right now walking in confusion, missing the very signs you just recognized, waiting for a light to reach them before their own moment passes. Scripture declares, "Give, and it shall be given unto you," not as a suggestion, but as a living exchange in the Spirit, where every seed becomes a harvest of revelation in another life. I feel this strongly, and I say it as a personal call. I am choosing to be a vessel that helps this message reach others who are still in the silence before their storm. When you release a seed through Super Thanks or through the PayPal link in the description or QR code on your screen, you are not supporting a video. You are igniting a chain of divine interactions across lives you may never meet. This is a moment of alignment, not hesitation, a moment where your action becomes someone else's awakening. And as you give, I declare over you that heaven will multiply clarity, protection, and restoration in your life. Step into this now. You felt it the moment it was said. That word anger. It stirred something inside you, didn't it? A tension. A discomfort. Maybe even a quiet fear. Because when you hear that Archangel Michael is angry, your mind immediately tries to interpret it through human understanding. You think of anger as something unstable, something emotional, something that lashes out and destroys without control. But this is not that kind of anger. This is not chaos. This is precision. What you are encountering right now is not emotional reaction. It is righteous response. It is the kind of force that rises only when something sacred has been disrupted, when something valuable is at risk, when something chosen is drifting too far from its intended path, and that something's you. Archangel Michael's anger is not directed at you as a person. It is directed at the misalignment that has attached itself to you. It is directed at the interference that is trying to take advantage of the shift you created. It is directed at anything that dares to step into a space that was meant to be protected, covered, and aligned. This is why it feels intense. Because this is not passive energy. This is active correction. You must understand this clearly, because if you misunderstand his anger, you will respond to it incorrectly. You will either shrink back in fear, thinking you are being rejected, or you will resist it, thinking it is too harsh, too overwhelming, too unnecessary. But neither of those responses will help you, because this anger is not against you. It is for you. It is standing between you and something that is already beginning to move toward you. It is intercepting what your mistake allowed to form. It is confronting it before it fully manifests. And in doing so, it is also confronting you, because you are the one who has the authority to close what was opened. This is where it becomes real. Because Archangel Michael will not override your will. He will stand. He will warn. He will confront. But he will not force correction upon you. And that is why his presence feels so strong right now. Because he is holding a line waiting to see if you will step back into alignment or continue forward in misalignment. This is not destruction. This is protection at its highest level. Think about it. If there was no intervention, no intensity, no urgency, the consequence would unfold quietly. You would not feel resistance. You would not feel pressure. Things would simply begin to shift in ways you would not immediately understand. And by the time you recognized it, it would be much harder to trace it back, much harder to correct it, much harder to reverse it. But that is not what is happening. Instead, everything feels heightened. Your awareness is sharper. Your emotions are more alert. Your spirit feels like it is being pulled into attention. That is not punishment. That is interruption. Archangel Michael's anger is the force of that interruption. It is what stops the quiet unfolding of consequence and replaces it with a loud moment of clarity. It is what disrupts the path you were heading down and demands that you look at it directly. And here is the truth you need to hear. If he did not care, there would be no confrontation. If you were not worth correcting, there would be no intensity. If your path did not matter, there would be no urgency. The very fact that this feels so strong is the clearest evidence that you are still under divine attention, still under protection, still within reach of realignment. But protection does not remove responsibility. This is where many people misunderstand divine intervention. They expect protection to mean that nothing will happen, that everything will be handled for them, that they can remain passive while things are corrected around them. That is not how this works. Protection creates a window, a moment, an opportunity, but you must step into it. And right now, Archangel Michael's presence is holding that window open. not indefinitely, not without limit, but long enough for you to respond. You can feel the tension of that window. It is in the way this message is landing on you. It is in the way your thoughts are slowing down, forcing you to pay attention. It is in the way something inside you is saying, "This matters more than I want it to." That is not fear. That is truth pressing through resistance. And resistance is natural. Part of you wants to defend your actions. Part of you wants to minimize the mistake. Part of you wants to believe that this is being exaggerated, that things will settle on their own, that you can move forward without fully addressing what happened. But that part of you is exactly what must be overcome. Because righteous anger does not negotiate with denial. It does not soften itself to make you comfortable. It remains steady until you'd either align with it or move against it. And that is where you stand now. Not in danger of being destroyed, but in a moment of decision. Will you receive this correction as protection, or will you resist it as pressure? Because in the next section, you will begin to see what is already forming as a result of your action, and why this moment of correction is more urgent than you realize. Do not look away now, because what is coming into view next is what this anger hath been trying to stop. Type "I receive correction" without resistance in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 4141 is now activated. Something has already started. Not in a way you can fully see yet. Not in a way that has completely surfaced in your physical reality. But in the unseen, in the deeper layers where alignment determines outcome, something has begun to take shape. And the reason this moment feels so urgent is because what you are dealing with is no longer just a past mistake. It is a present formation. You are not being warned about something distant. You are being shown something in motion. This is where many people misunderstand their situation. They think consequence arrives suddenly, like a single event that appears without warning. But that is not how it works. Consequence forms quietly, gradually, almost invisibly at first. It begins as a shift in energy, a subtle change in alignment, a small opening that allows something to enter and settle before it ever becomes visible. That is exactly where you are right now. The mistake you made did not remain isolated. It created a ripple, and that ripple is stabilizing into something more structured. Not fully complete, not yet fixed into your reality, but forming. And the longer it remains uncorrected, the more stable it becomes. You have already started to feel the early signs of this formation. Moments where things don't move as smoothly as they should. Situations that feel slightly off, even when they appear normal on the surface. A sense that something is not fully aligned, even when you try to convince yourself that everything is fine. These are not random disruptions. These are early manifestations of what has begun to take shape beneath the surface. And this is why the timing matters so much. Because there is a point in every formation where it can still be interrupted. A stage where it is not yet solid, not yet fixed, not yet anchored into your physical experience. But once it crosses that point, it becomes much harder to reverse. Not impossible, but significantly more difficult. You are being addressed before that point. That is the urgency you are feeling. Archangel Michael is not reacting late. He is intervening at the exact moment where the formation is real, but still reversible. Where the consequence is developing, but not yet fully expressed. Where your response can still determine whether it continues to build or begins to collapse. But here is what makes this moment critical. The formation does not pause on its own. It does not wait for you to feel ready. It does not slow down because you are unsure. It continues steadily, quite consistent until something interrupts it. And right now, that interruption must come from you. This is the part that requires honesty. because part of you may still be hoping that this will resolve itself, that things will settle naturally, that the discomfort you feel will pass without you needing to confront the source, that you can move forward and leave this behind without fully addressing it. But that is not how this works. What has been set in motion will continue in the direction it has been given unless you actively redirect it. And redirection requires awareness of acknowledgement and action. You have already been given the awareness. You are beginning to acknowledge what happened. But action, that is the piece that is still waiting to be activated. Because until action happens, the formation remains intact. You may not see it fully, but it is organizing itself around your current alignment. It is shaping itself according to what has been allowed to remain open. And if it completes that process, it will begin to express itself in ways that feel external, even though they were internally initiated. That is when people say, "I don't know why this is happening." But you are being shown why before it reaches that stage. This is what makes this moment so powerful. You are not reacting to consequence. You are intercepting it. You are standing at a point where what is forming can still be broken apart, where what is stabilizing can still be disrupted, where what is aligning incorrectly can still be realigned. But you cannot do that passively. You cannot do that by hoping. You cannot do that by delaying. You must decide to intervene in your own alignment. And this is where the pressure you feel begins to make sense. It is not there to overwhelm you. It is there to move you, to push you out of hesitation, to pull you into action, to prevent you from staying in that in-between space where awareness exists but change has not yet been applied. Because that in-between space is where formation strengthens, and you cannot afford to stay there. Not now. Not with what is at stake. You are closer than you realize to either breaking this or allowing it to complete. And in the next section, you will understand why, despite everything that has happened, you still have a window of mercy and why that window will not remain open indefinitely. This is the moment where you must stay fully present, because what comes next will determine how you move forward from here. Type "I interrupt what is forming" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 5252 is now activated. If everything you've heard so far feels intense, it's because it is. But here is what you must not miss. You are still here. You are still hearing this. You are still aware. And that changes everything. Because if the consequence had already fully taken hold, you would not be in this moment of clarity. You would not be feeling this interruption. You would not be given the chance to understand what is happening beneath the surface. Things would simply begin to unfold, and you would be left trying to make sense of outcomes without knowing their origin. But that is not your situation. You have been stopped. Not gently, not subtly, but deliberately. And that is what mercy looks like in moments like this. Not comfort, not silence, not the absence of pressure, but interruption. Mercy is the reason this message found you before the formation completed. Mercy is the reason your awareness has been heightened instead of dull. Mercy is the reason you are being confronted instead of left alone to continue in misalignment. And you need to understand this clearly. Mercy is not indefinite. It is a window, a defined space of time where correction is possible without full consequence. A moment where what has been set in motion can still be reversed without having to experience the full weight of its outcome. But like every window, it does not remain open forever. That is why the urgency feels so real. Because you are not just being informed. You are being timed. Not in a way that is meant to create fear, but in a way that reflects reality. Because what is forming does not stop simply because you are now aware of it. The process continues. The alignment continues. A movement continues. And the longer it continues without correction, the closer it moves toward completion. But right now it has not completed. Right now you are still within the window. This is the space where everything can still shift, where what has been opened can still be closed, where what has been misaligned can still be brought back into position, where what has begun to form can still be dismantled before it becomes something you have to deal with in a tangible way. But this window requires something from you. It requires response. Not later. Not eventually. Not when it feels more convenient or more comfortable. But now, while the awareness is fresh, while the clarity is present, while the pressure is still guiding you toward action instead of allowing you to drift back into distraction. Because that is the risk. That you feel this, understand this, even agree with this, and then slowly return to normal without doing what is necessary to complete the correction. That is how windows close. Not with a loud sound, not with an obvious signal, but quietly, as attention fades, as urgency softens, as the moment passes without being fully used. And once it closes, the situation changes. Not because you are abandoned, not because you are punished in anger, but because the opportunity to correct before consequence has passed, and now the process must complete what it started. That is why you cannot treat this casually. You cannot treat this as just another message, just another moment, just another thing to think about and move on from. This is a point of intervention, a moment where heaven has stepped in, not to do the work for you, but to give you the exact awareness you need to do what must be done. And you can feel that this is different. There is a weight to this that you cannot ignore, a clarity that feels sharper than usual, a sense that this is not something you can simply set aside and come back to later without losing something important. That feeling is accurate, because this is not just information. This is timing, and timing determines outcome. You are not being asked to be perfect. You are not being asked to undo everything instantly, but you are being asked to respond, to acknowledge fully, to take responsibility without minimizing, to move into alignment instead of staying in hesitation, to act while the window is still open, while the formation is still unstable, while the correction is still within reach. Because once you do that, something shifts. The pressure begins to lift. The clarity begins to strengthen. The formation begins to break apart instead of building further. And what was moving toward you begins to lose its structure, its direction, its ability to fully manifest. That is the power of responding within the window. But if you delay, if you hesitate, if you convince yourself that you have more time than you actually do, then the opposite begins to happen. The formation stabilizes, the consequence anchors, and what could have been prevented becomes something you must now move through. This is why Archangel Michael's presence remains so strong, because he is holding this window open, not indefinitely, but long enough for you to decide. And in the next section, you will understand the one thing that has the power to close this window faster than anything else, the trap that keeps people from acting even when they know exactly what they need to do. Stay with this, because what comes next will reveal why many people miss their moment even when it is right in front of them. Type "I respond" within the window in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 6363 is now activated. This is the moment where most people lose their window. Not because they didn't hear the warning, not because they didn't understand the message, not because they weren't given enough time or clarity, but because something inside them resisted the very thing that could have corrected everything. That something is subtle. It does not announce itself loudly. It does not feel like rebellion. It does not feel like defiance. In fact, it often feels reasonable, justifiable, even logical. But it is a trap, and its two strongest forms are pride and delay. You may not call it pride. You may not even recognize it as such. But it shows up in the way you minimize what happened, in the way you soften the seriousness of your action, in the way you tell yourself that it wasn't that big of a mistake, that you've done worse before and things turned out fine, that this situation will resolve itself just like others have. That is pride, not the loud, arrogant kind, but the quiet kind that resists full acknowledgement, the kind that keeps you from going all the way into truth because part of you still wants to protect your image of yourself. The part that says, I already understand this, I don't need to go deeper, even when something inside you knows there is more to confront. Pride keeps things partial. It allows you to acknowledge just enough to feel aware but not enough to actually change. And that is dangerous, because partial acknowledgement does not break formation. It does not close what was opened. It does not shift alignment. It simply creates the illusion of progress while everything underneath remains the same. Then comes delay. And delay feels even more harmless. It tells you that you will deal with this, just not right now. That you need a little more time to process. That you will take action later when things settle down, when you feel more ready, when you have more clarity. But what delay does not tell you is that time is not neutral. While you are delaying, the formation is continuing. While you are waiting, the alignment is stabilizing. While you are postponing action, the window is slowly narrowing. This is why delay is so effective, because it does not deny the truth. It simply postponed your response to it. And in doing so, it allows the very thing you are meant to interrupt to continue building without resistance. And the longer you stay in that state, the easier it becomes to stay there. That is how people miss their moment. Not by rejecting it outright, but by saying, I'll come back to this. And by the time they do, the situation has already shifted. This is what Archangel Michael is confronting right now. Not just the mistake, but the temptation to delay correcting it. Because he knows something you must now understand. You do not have unlimited time to respond. You have a window, and that window is affected by your willingness to act immediately, not eventually. This is where you must become very honest with yourself. What are you telling yourself right now? Are you saying, I hear this, but I need to think about it more? Are you saying, I understand, but I will handle it later? Are you saying, this is important, but I'm not ready yet? Those thoughts may feel reasonable, but they are the very mechanism that closes the window. Because readiness is not what determines your moment. Responsiveness is. You do not become ready first and then act. You act and readiness follows. That is how correction works. That is how alignment is restored. And that is why this moment feels so pressing. Because everything in you that wants to delay is being confronted by everything in you that knows you must act now. You can feel that tension. It is in the way your mind tries to slow this down, while your spirit is trying to move you forward. It is in the way part of you wants to step into this fully, while another part wants to retreat into comfort and familiarity. Attention is the battle, not outside of you, inside of you, and whichever side you choose determines what happens next, because pride will keep things as they are. Delay will allow things to continue forming, but humility and immediate action will break what has started before it reaches completion. This is the turning point, not the mistake, not the warning, but your response to it. And in the next section, you will be given exactly what you need to do, not in theory, not in vague understanding, but in clear direction. Because awareness alone is not enough. Action must follow. Stay here. Because what comes next is the moment where everything shifts if you choose it. Type "I reject delay and pride" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 7474 is now activated. This is the moment where everything shifts or stays the same. You have heard the warning. You have felt the weight. You have seen the pattern. And now, there is no more space for confusion. No more room for interpretation. What you need now is not more understanding but direction. Because deliverance is not automatic. It is activated. And it is activated through response. What you must do right now is not complicated, but it is precise. It requires honesty without resistance, action without delay, and alignment without negotiation. This is not about performing something external. This is about correcting something internal that has already affected what is forming around you. The first thing that must happen is acknowledgement without minimizing. Not partial. Not softened. Not explained away. You must fully recognize what happened and accept its weight without trying to reduce it to something smaller than it is. Because the moment you minimize it, you weaken your authority to correct it. But the moment you acknowledge it fully, you reclaim that authority. This is where deliverance begins. Not in denial, not in avoidance, but in clarity. You must bring the mistake into full awareness, not just as something you did, but as something that created a shift. Because when you see it clearly, you are no longer operating unconsciously. You are now in a position to change what was set in motion. Then comes the next step: separation. Whatever you aligned with, even briefly, must be disconnected from immediately. Not gradually, not slowly, but decisively. Because anything that remains connected continues to feed the formation that has already begun. This is where many people hesitate. They try to correct without separating. They try to fix the outcome while still holding on to the source. And that never works. Because alignment cannot be restored while misalignment is still being maintained. You must choose fully, not partially. Because partial separation leads to partial results. And partial results will not break what is forming. Then comes the most important shift: realignment. This is where you deliberately return to the direction you were meant to follow before the mistake occurred. Not emotionally, not symbolically, but intentionally. You make a clear internal decision that you are no longer moving in the direction you stepped into, and you align yourself again with what you know is right. This is not about feeling ready. This is about deciding. Because decision is what repositioned you. Feeling follows later. And once that decision is made, something begins to happen immediately. The formation that was stabilizing begins to weaken. The structure that was building begins to lose its hold. The consequence that was approaching begins to slow. Not because everything disappears instantly, but because the alignment that was feeding it has been removed. This is how deliverance works. Not by fighting what is forming, but by removing the agreement that allowed it to form. And you have more authority in this moment than you realize. Because what was opened through your decision can be closed through your decision. What was aligned incorrectly can be realigned correctly. What began through misalignment can end through correction. But only if you act now. Not later. Not after more thinking. Not after more hesitation. Now. While the awareness is clear. While the window is open. While the formation is still unstable. This is why Archangel Michael's presence has been so strong throughout this message. Because this is the exact point where most people either act or delay. And that choice determines everything. You are not being asked to do something impossible. You are being asked to respond to something that has already been revealed to you. You already know what needs to change. You already know what needs to be released. You already know where the misalignment occurred. And that knowing is not random. It is the exact clarity you need to act. This is the word of deliverance. Not something distant. Not something symbolic. But something immediate. Something you step into by choosing correction over comfort, action over delay, alignment over justification. And once you do, everything begins to shift. Not all at once. Not enough to change the direction of what was forming. Enough to break the momentum of what was building. Enough to move you out of consequence and back into alignment. And in the next section, you will begin to understand what is happening around you right now, the unseen battle that has been activated because of this moment, and why your response carries more impact than you can see. Stay fully present, because you are no longer just hearing this. You are in it. Type IACT now in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 8585 is now activated. As you step into this moment of deliverance, understand that your response is not only shifting your life, it is part of something far greater. There are others still trapped in cycles they do not understand, waiting for a message like this to reach them before their window closes. Scripture declares that when you sow, you will reap, and right now, your giving becomes a seed that opens spiritual doors in places you may never see. I feel this deeply, and I say it as a personal declaration. I am choosing to help carry this light to those still searching in the dark. When you release a super thanks or give through the PayPal link in the description or QR code on your screen, you are not supporting content. You are fueling a divine assignment that reaches souls at their exact moment of need. This is not a casual act. It is a prophetic response that aligns you with the very flow of restoration you are stepping into. As you give, I declare that clarity, protection, and breakthrough will return to you multiplied. Step into this now. What is happening right now is not just internal. It is not just about your thoughts, your decisions, or your personal correction. There is movement around you. Unseen, unspoken, but very real. Because the moment awareness entered, the moment you recognized the mistake, the moment you began to consider correction, something else responded. This is where the spiritual battle becomes active. Not dramatic in the way you might expect. Not loud or visible, but precise. Strategic. Focused on one thing, whether you follow through with what you now know you must do. Because your awareness has changed the environment. Before this moment, everything was moving in one direction. Quietly, steadily, without resistance. The formation was building. The alignment was stabilizing. The consequence was approaching without interruption. But now that process had been disrupted. And whenever disruption happens, there is reaction. There are forces that benefit from misalignment, from delay, from hesitation. And the moment you begin to move toward correction, those forces do not disappear quietly. They apply pressure. You may already feel it. A sudden increase in distraction. A pull to return to old thoughts. A desire to question what you just understood. A voice that says, "This is too much, maybe it's not that serious, maybe you can wait." That is not random. That is resistance. Because the moment you choose alignment, you become a threat to what was forming. And what was forming will attempt to preserve itself by influencing your next decision. This is why this moment feels heavier than it should. Because you are not just deciding in a neutral space. You are deciding in the middle of opposition. And at the same time there is protection. Archangel Michael is not standing at a distance. He is present within this moment, holding a boundary, creating a space where you can choose correctly without being overwhelmed. But that protection does not remove the battle. It contains it. It limits it. It gives you the clarity needed to act without being completely consumed by confusion. This is what you cannot see. The tension you feel is not just internal conflict. It is the interaction between two directions. One pulling you back into delay. One pulling you forward into action. And your role in this is not passive. You are not just observing this battle. You are the deciding factor within it. Because your decision determines which direction gains strength. If you hesitate, the pressure toward delay increases. If you act, the resistance begins to weaken. This is why even small actions matter right now. Not because they are symbolic, but because they shift alignment in real time. Every moment you choose clarity over confusion, you strengthen the direction of correction. Every moment you refuse to return to what you already recognized as misaligned, you weaken the formation that was building. This is how the battle is won. Not through force, but through decision. And this is where many people misunderstand what they are experiencing. They think the increased pressure means they are doing something wrong. They think the confusion means they misunderstood the message. They think the resistance is a sign to slow down. But in reality, it is confirmation. Because resistance only appears when something is being challenged. And right now you are challenging what was forming. You are interrupting a process that had already begun. You are stepping out of a direction that was quietly developing, and that requires force to be applied against you, not to destroy you, but to influence you back into the previous path. This is why you must stay grounded in what you now know, not in what you feel moment to moment, not in what your thoughts try to reframe, but in the clarity that has already been given to you. Because clarity is your anchor, and without it, you drift. This is also why Archangel Michael's presence remains steady, not fluctuating, not reacting emotionally, but holding position. Because he is not fighting for you in the way you might imagine. He is holding space for you to act. He is ensuring that the opportunity remains available. He is maintaining the boundary that allows you to choose alignment without being overtaken by what is trying to pull you back. But again, he will not choose for you. That is the part that remains in your hands. And this is where everything becomes very simple, even if it feels intense. You either move forward into correction or you drift back into delay. You either act on what you now understand or you allow the previous alignment to continue shaping what comes next. There is no neutral space anymore. You are already in motion. The only question is in which direction. And in the next section, you will see what happens if this moment is ignored, not as a threat, but as a reality that must be understood before you decide how to move forward. Stay with this, because you are closer than you think to the outcome. Type "I stand in alignment" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 9696 is now activated. There is a point, a very specific point, where everything shifts from possibility into reality. And that point is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It does not warn you that it has been crossed. It simply happens quietly as the window closes and the formation completes. This is what you need to understand right now. Ignoring this moment does not make it disappear. It does not pause what has already started. It does not cancel what has been set in motion. It allows it to continue uninterrupted until it reaches its full expression. And when it does, it no longer feels like something forming. It feels like something happening. This is the breaking point. The moment where what could have been corrected becomes something you must now experience. Not because you were punished. Not because you were rejected. But because the opportunity to intervene was not used. This is where many people become confused. They look at the outcome and ask, "Why is this happening to me?" But they are no longer looking at the beginning. They are only seeing the result. You are being shown the beginning right now before it becomes the result. And that is what makes this moment so serious. Because if you choose to ignore this, the process does not stop. It stabilizes. A misalignment becomes fixed. A formation becomes structured. And once it reaches that level, it begins to manifest in ways that feel external, even though they were internally initiated. You may start to notice things shifting more clearly, situations becoming more difficult than they should be, opportunities closing without explanation, relationships becoming strained without a clear cause, a sense of heaviness that does not lift, no matter how much you try to move past it. And at that point it feels confusing, because the connection between the cause and the effect is no longer obvious. That is the nature of delayed consequence. It separates the moment of action from the moment of result, making it harder to trace back, harder to understand, harder to correct. But you are being shown the connection now, before it reaches that stage. This is why ignoring this is not neutral. It is not simply doing nothing. It is choosing to allow the process to complete. And once it completes, your role changes. You are no longer preventing. You are navigating. You are no longer interrupting. You are responding to what has already formed. And while correction is still possible at that stage, it requires more effort, more time, more pressure, because you are now dealing with something that has already taken shape instead of something that was still forming. This is the difference between intervention and recovery. Right now, you are in intervention. If you ignore this, you move into recovery. And recovery always costs more than intervention. Not because you are being punished, but because you are now working against something that has already been established instead of stopping it before it forms. This is the reality you must face. Not to create fear, but to create clarity. Because clarity removes illusion. And illusion is what allows people to delay. It is what tells them they have more time than they actually do. It is what convinces them that things will work out on their own. It is what keeps them comfortable until the result appears. You are not in illusion anymore. You are in awareness. And awareness comes with responsibility. You now see what is forming. You now understand the process. You now recognize the urgency. And that means your choice carries weight. You can no longer say you didn't know. You can no longer say you weren't warned. You are standing at the exact point where direction is decided. And this is where the breaking point truly exists. Not in what happens to you, but in what you choose right now. Because ignoring this is not just an action. It is a decision. A decision to allow what has started to continue. A decision to step back from correction. A decision to move forward without realignment. And that decision will shape what comes next. But this is not where the message ends. Because what you must understand now is that the opposite is also true. If ignoring this leads to consequence, then responding to this leads to restoration. And in the next section, you will see exactly what becomes possible, not in theory but in reality, when you choose alignment instead of delay. Stay with this, because the outcome is still in your hands. Type "I do not ignore this moment" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1010 is now activated. Everything you have heard so far has carried weight. Warning. Urgency. Euedian. But now you need to see the other side. Because this moment was never only about stopping something negative. It was always about restoring something greater. And this is where your understanding must shift. Because obedience is not just about avoiding consequence. It is about activating restoration. The moment you choose to respond, truly respond, not partially, not hesitantly, but fully, something immediate begins to change. Not just within you, but around you. In the same unseen realm where the misalignment created a ripple, your correction creates a counter-movement. And that counter-movement is powerful, because alignment restores flow. What felt blocked begins to loosen. What felt unclear begins to sharpen. What felt heavy begins to lift. Not all at once, not in an instant transformation that erases everything, but in a real, noticeable shift that tells you something has changed. That is restoration beginning. You must understand this deeply. Heaven is not waiting to punish you. Heaven is waiting to respond to your correction. The moment you realign, the response is immediate. Not delayed, not withheld. Immediate. Because alignment reconnects you to what was always meant to flow toward you. What you interrupted begins to reconnect. What you delay begins to move again. What you weaken begins to strengthen. This is why this moment matters so much. Because you are not just stopping something negative. You are reopening something positive. Something that was already assigned to you. Something that was already in motion before the mistake shifted your alignment. And this is where the promise becomes real. Because restoration does not just bring you back to where you were. It moves you forward with greater awareness, with stronger discernment, with a deeper understanding of how your decisions affect your direction. You do not return the same. You return sharper, stronger, more aligned than before. This is what most people miss. They think correction is loss. They think admitting the mistake means they have failed in a way that sets them back. But in reality, correction accelerates you, because it removes what would have slowed you down much further. It breaks what would have created greater resistance later. It clears what would have turned into something heavier if left untouched. This is why Archangel Michael's presence has remained so firm. Not because he is holding something against you, but because he is guarding what is ahead of you. There is something you are moving toward that requires alignment. Something that cannot be reached while misalignment is active. Something that depends on your clarity, your stability, your willingness to stay in the direction you are meant to follow. And your response in this moment determines whether you step into that or delay it further. This is the restoration promise, not a vague idea, not something symbolic, but something real. If you obey, if you act, if you realign, then what was forming against you begins to collapse, and what was meant for you begins to move again. You will notice it, in small ways at first. A sense of peace returning where there was tension, clarity replacing confusion, movement replacing stagnation. And those small shifts will grow, because once alignment is restored, the flow continues. This is how you know you made the right choice. Not because everything becomes perfect instantly, but because direction becomes clear again. Because resistance begins to lose its hold. Because what once felt heavy no longer has the same power over you. This is the outcome of obedience. Not perfection, but restoration. Not instant reward, but realignment that leads to movement. And this is where your power is fully visible. Because everything you have heard, everything you have felt, everything that has been revealed leads to this one truth. You are not stuck. You are not beyond correction. You are not locked into consequence. You are standing in a moment where your decision determines your direction. And if you choose alignment, restoration is not a possibility. It is a certainty. And in the final section, everything comes together. The warning, the urgency, the decision. Because this is not just a moment to understand. This is a moment to act fully, finally, without hesitation. Stay with this, because the final activation is where your choice becomes complete. Type I receive restoration in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1111 is now activated. This is it. Not another moment to think. Not another moment to analyze. Not another moment to delay. This is the turning point. Everything you have heard, everything you have felt, everything that has been revealed to you has led to this exact place. Not by accident, not randomly, but intentionally. Because this is where your direction is decided. Right here, right now. There are no more layers to uncover. No deeper explanations to wait for. No additional signs required. You have already been shown enough to act. You have already been given clarity that many people never receive before their moment passes. And now the responsibility is yours. Because a turning point is not defined by what you know. It is defined by what you do. You can feel it. Attention has not left. That awareness has not faded. That inner voice has not gone silent. It is still there, steady, pressing, waiting for you to respond. Not tomorrow, not later, but now. Because this is the moment where your decision becomes final. Not final in the sense that nothing can ever change again, but final in the sense that it sets the direction of what comes next. Whether you move into restoration or allow the consequence to continue forming. And this is where many people hesitate. Right at the edge of action. They come this far. They understand everything. They feel the urgency. They even agree with what needs to be done. But when it comes time to act, they pause. They look for one more confirmation. One more sign. One more moment to feel completely ready. But readiness is not coming. Because readiness is not what is required. Obedience is. You do not need to feel perfect to act. You do not need to feel completely confident to act. You do not need to have every detail figured out to act. You need to choose. Fully. Without holding anything back. Without leaving space for delay. Without allowing the same pattern that led to the mistake to repeat itself in this moment. This is where you break it. Not later. Now. Because this moment is not just about correcting what happened. It is about becoming someone who responds differently. Someone who listens when clarity comes. Someone who acts when truth is revealed. Someone who does not allow hesitation to take control when direction is clear. That is the real activation. Not just changing one action, but changing your pattern. And once that pattern shifts, everything else follows. Because you are no longer moving unconsciously. You are no longer drifting. You are choosing your alignment. You are deciding your direction. And that decision carries power. More than you realize. Because what happens next is not random. It will reflect what you choose in this moment. If you act, if you realign, if you follow through completely, then what was forming against you will collapse. Not solely, but decisively. Because it loses its foundation. And what was meant for you, what was delayed, what was waiting, will begin to move again. But if you hesitate, if you allow even a small part of you to delay, if you leave this moment without completing what you know you must do, then the pattern continues. And the opportunity you have right now will not feel the same again. This is why this is a turning point. Because it does not repeat itself in the same way. Moments like this are rare. Clear. Direct. Undeniable. And you are in one right now. So the question is simple. Not complicated. Not hidden. Simple. What are you going to do? Because whatever your answer is will shape everything that follows. This is your activation. This is your decision. This is your moment. And it will not wait. Type "I step into alignment now" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1212 is now activated. As this moment of activation settles into your spirit, understand that what just happened here is not only for you. It is meant to ripple outward into lives that are still waiting for their turning point. There are people right now standing in their own moment of delay, their own window of mercy, needing this exact message before their direction is decided. The word declares that when you sow, you open the heavens over your life, and every seed becomes a harvest of light in someone else's darkness. I say this as a personal call rising from this very message. I am stepping into this moment not just for myself, but to help carry this truth to others who need to hear it before it's too late. When you release a super thanks or give through the PayPal link in the description or the QR code on your screen, you are not supporting content. You are fueling a divine assignment that reaches souls at their exact moment of awakening. This is not a casual act. It is a prophetic response that aligns your life with the same restoration you have just received. As you give, I declare that doors will open, clarity will increase, and protection will surround everything connected to you. Step into this now.